Leslie, you remember what a great day that was?
I do. It was one of my best days. And it was just the beginning of 23 years of our rabbi and our dear friend being with us. And it was wonderful to have his mentor with us that day also.
For those of you who haven't yet had the chance to discover this about Mark, he fulfills the very first requirement of a contemporary rabbi. He cares about you. He wants to share with you in your joys and in your sorrows, as a pastor, as a neighbor, as a representative of the Jewish tradition.
My friends, that is what being a rabbi means to me. It means making connections to you as we go through life together.
He's very special, he's kind, he's considerate, and he's trying harder than anybody in the whole wide world.
This has become our second family. And that's one thing we see that Rabbi Cooper is doing right away. He's becoming with his family and joining it to the other families here.
I think he's very intelligent, and I think he has a very wonderful sense of humor. And I like a sense of humor because I like to laugh.
He's shown an ability to identify with the children. The kids will recognize that he's part of their group and not just somebody who's up there.
Or to Cowboy Rabbi Cooper, and come make your own latkes.
I'm making latkes. It's Hanukkah, and we're making latkes.
Smile, because it's Hanukkah. Take some onions. I have 2 eggs in there.
More eggs. Definitely.
More eggs.
More eggs.
Hey, give that shape. Shape. There. Look at that latke.
Look at that latke. I don't believe it.
We all know that Rabbi has a playful side, and we enjoy that, but he also has a love of tradition, and he's really shared that with all of us at all of our congregational celebrations.
Yeah, I agree. And once in a while, still a little irreverence might creep in. Some of our families have been involved at Oheb Shalom for generations. So you remember Bob Ginsburg? He was one of them?
Of course I remember Bob. I could never forget Bob. And I also remember that he asked Mark to do all of the family life cycle events wherever they happened to take place.
Rabbi Cooper has played a huge role in many of our life's events. He knew 4 generations: Ruth, Bob and Ann, Marielle and Michael and Deborah, and Aaron and Rachel.
After Benjamin was born, Bob asked if the rabbi would do the bris. The rabbi spent Shabbat in Boston, and then he came Sunday morning and performed the bris.
A bris is a big deal. You know, it's your baby, and for us it was our very first one. Closed my eyes for a moment and trusted Rabbi Cooper.
I was grateful that he did it, and he went out of the way to do this for us. We really appreciated that.
We were married in March 26, 2006.
We felt very strongly about having Rabbi Cooper do it.
Mike was set to step on the glass, and he said, wait, and he held his hands.
I was like, stop!
We're all going to call out Mazel Tov. You ready? Mazel Tov!
He's got an easiness, a calmness about him that puts me and I assume others at ease.
And our kids too. And he attended every event we went to almost. For years, we were wondering what his next costume was going to be.
Right.
Yes.
The rabbi was always there for us. When Bob was sick and he was in the hospital, the rabbi helped me get through the whole thing. I mean, not only he officiated, but he talked with me. He was at the house and he was there. He was there not only as my rabbi, but as a friend.
Jerry Blum was my mentor when I very unexpectedly became, a leader at Oheb Shalom.
Paula was always somebody I looked up to as a fellow Smith College alumna, and I just always wanted to be her when I grew up.
At the end of their lives, Mark was really there for each one of them.
My mother says that when she was a kid in Hebrew school, she knew about those strange Blum children. my father and his two older siblings, and they got married in Oheb Shalom at the High Street Synagogue in 1953. There's a wonderful photograph of my mother dancing with Rabbi Levitsky. I don't think anyone ever danced with Rabbi Levitsky other than on that occasion. When it came time for my grandfather, his father-in-law's yard site, my mother couldn't go, and so I said I would go, and my father said he wanted to come with me. So there was a luncheon afterward. Now my father at that point was very uncomfortable being out in public, even at the shul, because he was aware of his incapacities and his limitations and his confusion, and it just made him feel very embarrassed. Rabbi Cooper came along and sat down and just started chatting with my father, and he immediately put him at ease. He made him feel completely welcome and at home. And then he turned to my father. He was ready to leave. He turned to my father and he kissed him on the cheek. And my father beamed. And the rabbi turned to me and said with this huge ear-to-ear grin, "I bet you I'm the first rabbi of this synagogue to ever kiss your father." But it was a beautiful gesture. He didn't have to say any words. His expression just was one of complete happiness. He clearly felt very loved at that moment. And that's exactly what the rabbi, I believe, intended, and it was quite successful. To have someone he cared for, respected, do something that loving just made me feel so happy for my father and so grateful to the rabbi. I think it says he's a very caring person. Being an ear for my mother when she was aging and was feeling very challenged, contemplating giving up, he was enormously comforting to me. The rabbi saw me in the hallway and he just said to me, "You must miss your father." And I just broke down in sobs, and he just held me. He hugged me and held me. I don't know how I would have gotten through the last weeks of my mother's life without his support. All I can say is it matters a lot to have community when you go through these experiences. It matters a lot.
Mark has been all about building community and creating a family feeling in the congregation. It's such an important part of his legacy with us.
It's so true, and there's no better example than how he did that in the trip that he organized and led to Israel.
So Rabbi was very persistent and very enthusiastic, and he would sort of, corner any one of us whenever he would see us and say, "I'm putting this trip together. You guys should come. You should bring your kids. I'm putting this trip together." And he was so excited about it that his enthusiasm was contagious.
Many of us on this right now had at least one child who was going to be bat mitzvahed. It was just going to be very special to have a bat mitzvah on Masada with the synagogue.
And he also wanted to make it an intergenerational trip, which it was because so many of you brought your parents, Mark's mother, Ina, and Elsie, and Carrie's mother, Bernice. We became a foursome, really. We felt very comfortable and very wanted.
You were very wanted, more than wanted. You added so much to the trip, so thank you.
Another wonderful thing is that we really got to meet and interact and spend time with our families, other congregants' families, and get to know them. And he facilitated that. He made that happen.
We got to see the rabbi out of the normal situation where we all interact with him, and as we all know, he's got an incredible sense of humor. And so as he wrote out and described the day's itinerary, it was just woven with this an enormous amount of silly, not silly jokes, but just really good humor. And his true humor just shined, and it started off the morning that way. It always just made the day start off great.
My specific memory of the rabbi is when we first landed in Israel, and we were so tired. I was traveling with my mother. We had our children with us, many of us. It had been a long flight, and we were bedraggled. And we got to our first place. I remember a tent, and
planting
there
a
was
tree. It was planting trees.
We planted a tree, and there was Rabbi standing there with his arms open. And he said, "Welcome to Israel," with such joy that it set the tone for the whole trip to connect Israel with joy And I think that's how everyone should be brought to Israel, with that feeling. I know my children have it still, of pure joy to be together and to be lucky enough to be in Israel together with the rabbi.
My favorite memory with the rabbi was that I was very taken with the birds on the trip down from the Galilee. And there were these beautiful birds that we saw from the bus. And when we would make a stop, and I would always say, you know, what kind of birds are those? They're gorgeous. And they were all different. And the tour guides didn't really know or weren't that interested. And I would always talk about the birds. And so we stopped someplace. And after the stop, the rabbi came up to me and he gave me this pamphlet that he had bought at the gift shop, The Birds of Israel. He said, I think you'd be interested in this. And it was just such a thoughtful, wonderful gesture on his part that has always stuck with me.
I just remember when we got on the bus after the bar and bat mitzvahs, and I remember the rabbi is walking around with a microphone and he's asking people, I think he was the rabbi, asking people about what they felt about that experience. And I remember Josh, who had been bar mitzvah, grabs the microphone and say, today was the best day of my life. Oh. And that really made an impact, and how the rabbi hugged him. And that was a wonderful moment to just see that. And we were so pleased that Josh felt that.
David, I remember that. That was really beautiful when he said that. Yeah.
It touched all of us. We all connected in a way upon Masada at that moment. That whether you had a child being bar bat mitzvah or not, we were all connected.
We just connected with all the kids, and some of them had like nicknames, and I still call Joshy. Yeah.
Well, he clearly loves the congregation and has a deep bond with the families, and enough so that it was so natural to be with him in Israel. And I think that speaks volumes about his love for the congregation.
I think that he really looked upon us, even though we were all adults, as his children. And he was showing us Israel as he knew it and as he felt it. And his love for Israel also was so much a part of what he wanted to teach us and what he wanted us to experience while we were there.
To me, it's about his generosity. His generosity around bringing us all together as a sub-community of Oheb. It's about his generosity and wanting to share Israel with us.
And that's what I wish for the rabbi. He's taking a part of us with him that will stay with him, and vice versa. His leadership and his compassion and his enthusiasm and his humor.
I hope he looks back on this period in his life as one during which he accomplished a lot by making a significant impact on so many people, so many families, and he really made a significant impact on our lives. And we'll have this memory forever.
For 23 years, we have been nurtured by our rabbi. And at the same time, he and Amy have raised and every week blessed their 5 amazing sons. Now, they and their spouses are in a place to reciprocate that blessing. They sing for us as well, in the prayer that this marvelous man who has nurtured all of us bask in the light of God's countenance and enjoy the wholeness of peace.
Yeah.